script. Okay. The script of engagement. Sometimes the crazies fight, and sometimes the crazies don't fight.
Hillary, is aware of all the work that you guys do.
Campaign's fully in.
And then they tell Hillary what's going on.
Well, Hillary knows she can shake her hand.
Yeah.
The campaign pays DNC pays Democracy Partners pays the focal group goes and executes the bill.
We have mentally ill people, we pay. Make no mistake. Over the last 20 years, I've paid off a few homeless guys to do crazy stuff.
This is Scott Vogel, who was fired by the campaign. One of the people that Scott Vogel says was doing this, he clearly refers to a woman named Shirley Teeter, a 69-year-old woman, sufferer of COPD, someone who attended these rallies in North Carolina. Scott Vogel claims credit for her, says this elderly woman was one of his supposed bird doggers. That's the people that he says incites the violence at the Trump rally.
She was one of our activists.
She was under activists
Who had been trained up to bird dogs.
Trained up to bird dogs. So we quote Scott Vogel, published this. This is all leading up to a very important thing. We published a story, big story, mentioning the debates between Hillary and Trump, front page of the New York Times. And then we get sued by the elderly lady, who sues us for defamation. I quoted him. You saw him. He says, I just quoted him. Why is she suing me? Why isn't she suing him? It's newsworthy when a Hillary Clinton operative says that this person does this at the rally. A brief story about what happened. This is really fascinating. This elderly woman, Shirley Teeter, sues me in federal court in North Carolina.
And now in Asheville, the trial over a lawsuit against a right-wing group known for using disguises and hidden cameras to uncover alleged bias and corruption. The woman is suing Project Veritas,
Who claims she was then libeled in a video
produced by Project
Veritas and founder James O'Keefe. Shirley Teeter says the group released the video 1 month after the assault. She says that video led to online threats, which made her fear for her safety.
So this is one of many lawsuits they throw at us, and they use this as evidence that we're discredited. We get sued. But we're going to take you on a journey through what happens in one of these lawsuits. This is the individual, the plaintiff, sympathetic plaintiff, has an oxygen tank, goes to court. They had their sympathetic plaintiff. They had 6 or 7 lawyers put us through depositions, put our undercover reporters through depositions. Very uncomfortable experience. Most journalists don't like to disclose their sources and methods. We were forced to. And we didn't have 7 lawyers. I don't know who was funding these lawyers, but that's another story. We only had 1 or 2 lawyers, but they had their sympathetic plaintiff. I had our sympathy card as well, because justice is blind. I got an attorney who is blind. We go to court. The plaintiff rests their case. This is a federal jury trial. We quoted Scott Vogel accurately. So the federal judge says, hold up, right before the verdict, he says, quote, if citizens in the media are handcuffed by a fear of liability, that's detrimental to political discourse, it's detrimental to society, it's detrimental, the federal judge said, to our fundamental freedoms. He says, I can't even let this go to a jury. There's just too many things at stake here. These are fundamental principles. These people had quoted Scott Vogel accurately. What, you're going to sue him because James O'Keefe didn't ask follow-up questions? And the judge also said this when he put his gavel down and dismissed the case in stunning fashion. He said, if you appeal this to the Fourth Circuit, he says, I hesitate to think where we're headed as a country.
If I have gotten this wrong, and the Fourth Circuit says that this is not what the law is, I hesitate to think where the First Amendment is going in this country.
And we walked out of the courtroom, and would you believe it? Project Veritas has won every single lawsuit. They said, why don't you just give this person $10,000, $50,000? And I sat in that mediation, I said, so help me God, I will not give you 1 penny. We had to spend $700,000. And the federal judge even said when this thing was dismissed, he made this extraordinary statement. He said, wait a second. If CBS News introduced it said 60 Minutes, well, guess what? The federal judge brought up Mike Wallace in this case. He said this.
I realize Mike Wallace is dead, but I think about in terms of, well, if Mike Wallace did that, could someone have sued him? How quickly do you think that case would be thrown out of court? It just seems to me that that sort of standard for any type of journalism is one that eviscerates the First Amendment, doesn't it?
Eviscerates the First Amendment. And all the people, Politico, The Hill, the New York Times, that said the chief is getting sued, Project Veritas, none of them printed any follow-up story about the verdicts in any of these 7 lawsuits. Not a word, and that's when it dawned upon me. Of course, it's been dawning upon me my whole life, but when I walked out of that courtroom, it really dawned upon me that our press is deeply, deeply corrupt. And they know that. It doesn't mean that they're bad journalists or even mean they're bad people. They're part of an industrial system of production that, as Walter Lippmann said 100 years ago, manufactures consent. It isn't about the public's right to know. It's about, at best, money, at worst, advocacy, propaganda. It's toxic. And they think that it's anathema to the First Amendment for us to investigate them. I say that it's 100% consistent with the First Amendment to investigate the press. I've seen things in my young life that shock me. A Washington Post reporter publishing, and this is a direct quote, "There is no evidence that he did not say the things attributed to him." What the heck is that? I get sued for quoting someone accurately, and they publish that. We've had 300 retractions printed about Project Veritas. They said we went after Acorn because of an animus towards black people. They retracted that. They said I wiretapped a senator. They retracted that. They said that Acorn videos were false. They retracted that. On page A2, executive editor Marty Barron wasn't happy about that one. Sometimes they even retract their own headlines. And that is why we investigate the press. We went, first of all, 2 years ago, we just walked up to one of these individuals, Dan Jones, asked him a basic question. Is this Russia story for real?
Hey man, we met in Palm Springs a few years back.
You good?
Yeah, how you been? What are you doing? What do you think's gonna happen this week? I mean, with the whole Russia thing.
I love things that would be nothing but
Just a big nothing burger. Why don't they say this publicly? Why do they only say it privately? There's a gap between how people behave in public and private. And CNN does their thing, the video is not real.
This guy is a hoaxer, he's a fraudster, he's been convicted, he's paid fines, he has to apologize, he's a scumbag, and he does this stuff all the time.
So when on the tape you say that the Russia investigation was a big nothing burger, what do you mean?
Sometimes they do have a modicum of shame, though. And we get these other people. These are not always villains. These are honest people in the press. They won't tell you this on TV, but they'll say it behind the scenes. What do you really think about the Russia thing? Well, it's BS. Why do they do that? Because of rating.
And why CNN is constantly like, Russia this, Russia that? Because it's ratings.
Ratings and the manufacture of consent because of the pressure to make money. Also, all that journalism school stuff you hear about, well, yeah, that's really cute.
But all the nice cutesy little antics that you get talked about in journalism school, you're just like, that's adorable. That's adorable.
Yeah, this is a business. That's why we print this stuff, even though, as John Bonnefield said, it was BS. And these videos trend. They're the #1 trending videos on YouTube. Everyone's talking about them, and then Silicon Valley says, wait a second, we can't allow this sort of information to get to the people. We can't allow these videos to get millions of views. So then Silicon Valley gets involved and starts shadow banning you and starts tinkering with the algorithm. So we go undercover into Silicon Valley. And we get them to and the media will say, well, this doesn't exist. Well, don't take my word for it. Listen to these software engineers at Twitter telling me what a shadow ban is.
One strategy is shadow ban so that you have ultimate control. The idea of a shadow ban is you ban someone but they don't know they've been banned. They keep posting but no one sees their content. So they just think that no one's engaging with their content when in reality no one's seeing it.
That's a pretty clear, explicit statement there about the shadow bans, which they say don't exist. So the press defends Twitter. Twitter says, no, we don't do this. This is not journalism. It's not journalism to just echo, repeat, reiterate what the people who are spokespeople for the $1 billion Leviathan tell you. You got to challenge them. You got to challenge them, which requires being brave. Now, I want to pivot. I got 6 minutes left to what happened next. All of this happened, and then I get a message, not from a girl who's messaging me on Facebook, but from someone who's messaging me within Facebook. Facebook employee, who says, the things I find the company doing are appalling. I felt the public has a right to know, even if it meant sacrificing my own career.
I saw things going on that I personally found to be troubling. I knew that something had to be done about it, and so I felt that the best thing to do was to inform the public.
Inform the public she did. She released code, screenshots showing them deboosting these videos for political reasons. Facebook fired her for doing so. That inspired another insider, a guy inside Google, a guy named Greg Coppola, who also went public while currently employed for Google, and he said this.
It's a time to decide, do we run the technology? Does the technology run us? Are we going to continue to have elections that mean anything? Are we going to continue to think for ourselves, or are we going to just let the biggest tech companies decide who wins every election from now on?
He went public, Google retaliated against him, and that inspired a third insider within Google to come public. This one leaked us a memorandum, a secret memorandum talking about something out of a George Orwell novel, algorithmic unfairness. Listen to this.
In this Project Veritas video, which I did watch last night, imagine that a Google image query for CEOs shows predominantly men. Even if it were a factually accurate representation of the world, it would be algorithmic unfairness. In some cases, it may be appropriate to take no action if the system accurately affects current reality, while in other cases it may be desirable to consider how we might help society reach an equitable state via product intervention. What does that mean?
When I go to Google search and I type in a search for something, I'm hoping to get reality, the facts. Evidently not. And the information the insider gave us helped us corroborate what Google really was doing as it related to the 2020 election.
That's the word I think that was a great Google. I met her, she's very excited. Like, that will not make it better. There will be wonderful people will be charged with preventing the next situation.
Charged with preventing the next Trump situation, says Google.
Do you think it's Google's job to, quote, prevent the next Trump situation?
Thank you, Senator. I don't agree with that.
That prompted another insider. Within this is starting to have a chain of events. Said that Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro were Nazis. This led to another congressional hearing.
Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and Dennis Prager are Nazis. Given that that's a premise, what do we do about it? 2 of 3 of these people are Jewish, very religious Jews, and yet you think they're Nazis. It begs the question, what kind of education people at Google have?
Insider who blew the whistle of them all. The Pinterest insider who showed us code showing that they were censoring Bible verses. You couldn't type in a Bible verse. On Pinterest, he leaked us code showing they considered live action of the nation's leading pro-life organization as pornography. It took the video down, but it didn't deter Eric. Eric went public. Eric Cochran, and he said this.
To me, there's no other option. Like, I could go through life, and I could live in the comforts of life, and I could go on for 80 years, and then make money, do the formula of life, then I'll just fall to ashes. And I think that's how a lot of people live their lives. This is something that no matter what happens, no matter what I lose, it'll mean something after I'm gone.
This young man was making hundreds of thousands of dollars working in Silicon Valley, and he gave it all up for the public's right to know. I'm proud to announce that Eric Cochran is backstage. Eric, would you please come out here?
They thought that would be the end of me. They thought that I would shut up and fear being blackballed. But I hope I'm a manifestation that there's life after blowing the whistle, after breaking free from the formula of life, that you can do the right thing. And all it takes is just one insider on the inside of these major institutions, be it education, be it Google, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, be it political campaigns, be it government, be it big media. And everybody knows somebody on the inside. If you know somebody on the inside of a major institution, come talk to us. Go to projectveritas.com/brave. find us after, we will personally work with insiders to tell their stories. What are you saving your ammo for? Get skin in the game. Now is the time to act, absolutely.
Because of what Eric did, another person came to us on the inside. He came to us. We're proud to announce the next insider who will blow the whistle. He's been recording for months. All of his colleagues, his bosses, his senior people. This may be the biggest story Project Veritas ever broke. Next week, the next insider who will blow the whistle on the next organization is within CNN.
Isn't it bless your heart to see young studs like us? We've done our own investigative journalism, and we have some news to break right in front of you. You notice this picture, the first picture you're going to see. We have that picture? Now this is Andy Kaufman, who allegedly died in the early 80s. Or did he? Just saying, which one is the Laka Gravas? Really? Okay. Well, listen, we brought in our cleanup hitter to hit a grand slam. Now that the bases are loaded, we have Dana Loesch. She is the top nationally syndicated female talk show host in America, broadcasts her award-winning daily radio show, The Dana Show, from Dallas, Texas. She is a staunch Second Amendment advocate. She's previously worked with Gun Owners of America and the NRA. Author of 2 best-selling books, Hands Off My Gun, Defeating the Plot to Disarm America, and Flyover Nation. You can't run a country you've never been to, which predicted the coastal flyover divide and sentiment that decided the 2016 election. Her third book will be coming out this spring. You'll be hearing more about that. But for me personally, most impressive of all, she is a fellow St. Louis Blues and Cardinals fan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the Values Voter Summit, Dana Loesch.
Jim for a while here. I always wonder, so I like this, and I also like a handheld, because I feel like all of this stuff gets in the way. And I also like to threaten the crowd surf. I'm going to talk to you today about 4 things. 4 very simple things that we have all been dealing with the past, well, actually, it seems like it's been a long time. Identity politics, socialism within the church, the GOP war over Trump, and the rage mob. So I'm going to talk about all of the things that you're not supposed to talk about at parties and with your Republican friends because it makes everybody angry. But I think we have to have these conversations because it's incredibly important. So just right off the bat, I came in from Miami this morning and I was in Denver, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, talking about the Second Amendment ordinance that they had just passed in that city. And I had some protesters that were out there. And there was a whole entire row of protesters that had just purchased tickets with the explicit tactic of standing up and walking out as I'm discussing possible solutions to quote-unquote gun violence. And so I challenged them. I said, well, unless you all are just a bunch of scenesters, unless you all are just a bunch of posers, I challenge you to stay in this room and let's talk about actual solutions in good faith. Otherwise, then I'm going to assume you don't care about the same things that I care about. You're actually not interested at all in solving the violence problem. And so they stayed. They didn't get up and walk out, as we've seen so many times before. I mean, I love the optic of just the hard battle and the arguing, but at some point, what is the point? If I'm not winning anybody over to my side, then we're just screaming at each other, and then I have to go drink that horrible throat coat tea from Walgreens so that I can go on air and do 3 hours of radio. Nobody wants to do that. So one of the ways that they always try to undermine people is with identity politics. And so it was scribbled in chalk on the sidewalks of University of Colorado at Boulder that I was a fascist, which is news to me, and that I was a big racist because I believe in Jesus, I believe in my Second Amendment rights, and I just think that you should be cool to people. And apparently that is what defines racism and bigotry and everything else. So I'm just going to make this really clear. The idea of racial supremacy is an un-Christian view entirely. It is a sin, and it promotes the supremacy of one person over another, making identity an idol, and it supplants God in the order of sovereignty and worship. God did not make one of his children more redeemable than the other, but to falsely accuse someone of such a moral deficiency as some sort of substitute for a political argument is also stupid. The whole idea of identity politics is a very progressive view. It's a very progressive ideal because you are, instead of identifying as members of the kingdom, instead of identifying as children of God, you're identifying as A, B, C, D, or E. Pick your category. And that's not how we're supposed to view ourselves, and that's not how we're supposed to view each other. But this needs to be propagated so that you have statist entities that can take the place of God, can take the place of the church, so that government can become God. That is the entire point. It's to undermine God. In the United States, you don't have to believe in God to enjoy the natural rights that come with it. Our rights come from the divine as affirmed by the Constitution. And this is why it is so incredibly important that we maintain this. Because, as I said, even if you're not a Christian, even if you don't believe in God, your rights are still protected because they came from the divine. They were not created by men in court. Because they were not created by men, they're not under the dominion of men. Do you honestly trust your fellow man to handle all of that? Are we really honestly putting that much faith in our government? Do we trust a godless government to be fair in these matters? A godless government that has legalized abortion and we fund it to the tune of over $536 million a year? A government that has allowed over 300,000 veterans die while waiting to get the treatment they are owed from Veterans Affairs? This government that enslaved a people? This government that sent an entire ethnicity on the trail of genocide? This government? No, no, no. Our rights were not created by men. They were created by God. But it's all a part of that social justice. I've even been seeing this in the church, which is unbelievable. Social justice. Social justice has been bastardized, this phrase, because in the church, it is the state of distribution of equality, which is wrong. Biblically, social justice focused on the sharing of each other's burdens. Social justice focused on stewardship, being there for your fellow man in times of trouble, not leaving them out there for the fates, but intervening and saying, I'm here for you, I want to serve you, I want to help you. That is social justice as biblically defined. It's not the redistribution of wealth. And it's all about being guided by free will of the individual in a society, which is so unbelievably important. Like I said, those people who believe the state to be morally superior to the will of the individual later incorporated the act of distribution as being done by the giant hand of the state. The socialist definition is the equalization of person and equity, and merit is erased. When you remove merit, you remove the incentive for ambition and unfairly diminish the equity of labor. And I say this as a poor child who was raised by a single mother until my preteen. Equality is not uniformity. Bernie Sanders said in a political fundraiser that he does not believe in charity. That was his actual verbatim quote. He does not believe in charity. Socialists like Sanders outsource the responsibility of their stewardship because they're lazy and they're selfish. They outsource it to the state, who does a horrible job. It's not because certainly they can't be convinced that the government does a better job at stewarding of other people than they would do themselves. Socialists have no faith in the private individual because they worship the God of government. Oh, they're religious. It's just they worship Uncle Sam. And meanwhile, Christians and most Republicans and conservatives have no faith in government, but we worship the God of grace who calls his kingdom to be his hand and feet. Faith, ladies and gentlemen, is freedom. It is freedom. Look at China and Hong Kong right now. It is absolutely the opposite of the restrictions of these tyrannies, which is why our rights were enshrined, why the founders did it. Stewardship, like I said, never to be a function of a godless government, but we're not called upon to misuse our gifts and hide them for ourselves instead of acting in the service of other people. That's not what we're called to do at all. We are called to benefit those in need through the blessings or benefits that we have received through Christ. That's what we're called to do. My son actually got into an argument with one of his teachers in high school because the teacher had suggested that Jesus was a socialist, and my child was raised in the church and has a preacher for a grandfather, and we do family devotionals, and we homeschooled him up till 8th grade and memorized scripture and everything else. So that was not a fun argument for that teacher. My son is now 18 years old and he's going into law. And the reason, by the way, that stewardship is voluntary is because it's edification of the spirit. That is why it is a brilliant dual purpose by a brilliant designer. Speaking of churches and all of that, David Platt is a pastor of a North Virginia church. I saw this story. I have a book that is on some of this that's coming out this spring. David Platt apologized because he prayed for our president in his church. I thought that was kind of interesting. He had to apologize to those disgruntled members of his congregation because he prayed for a sinner. Are we not all sinners? And I thought that it was kind of unbelievable. I guess his congregation was perfect. I guess those disaffected congregants thought that the president was beyond redemption and beyond prayer. And this is for everyone out there, especially certain individuals that I will not name who always say that, well, if you're a Christian and you vote for Trump, I guess you don't love Jesus anymore. Well, I guess you don't believe in an omnipotent, mighty, powerful God of grace who hasn't used people like David. I guess you forget about Saul of Tarsus, who was the most murderous person of the era, and yet he was met on the road. The MSNBCs and the Huffington Post and the CNN and the ABCs and the NBCs and the alphabets X, Y, and G. For all of those individuals out there who try to say that Christians are somehow compromising ourselves because of our support for the president that we support, have you forgotten the boundless purpose of grace? Do you think that God is not able to use broken people, including you? I wasn't always this way. I very much empathize with the Sons of Thunder. When I was reading the Bible, I've been doing this for a long time, and I really identify with the Sons of Thunder. I don't know if it was ever meant to be humorous. I'm not going to put words in the Lord's mouth, but those were always the most entertaining passages of the Bible to me, because the sons were always like, well, Jesus, should we burn him? We just call some fire down. They were always told, no, y'all need to calm down. No. They were changed by the Lord, and their mission of persuading hearts and minds and saving souls was bigger than any display of authority that they were later granted to use. I love that story. So I'm going to skip ahead because I have a lot of stuff to get into. The rage mob, never bend a knee to the rage mob. I've never bent a knee except to God in prayer. That is the ultimate to bend a knee to.